It's a sad history, guys. But we could have been the bond, do you understand? That united Jewish people and Gentiles. We were the glue that could have glued it together, but the enemy got in there and pulled us apart. You got that? That's the history. And we have a lot of gaps in that history. We don't know exactly what happened amongst Jewish believers. We always know that there's always been a remnant of Jewish believers. Only in the 1800s do we start to learn more. In the 1800s, we come into contact with someone named Leopold Cohen. Leopold Cohen was a rabbi in Hungary. He came to New York and he started sharing, he started walking the streets, and he got a gospel tract, and it challenged him, and he took it home and he started studying the scriptures, things like Psalm 2, Isaiah 53, Psalm 22, Psalm 110, Ezekiel 37, 38, 39, and he said, Zechariah 12, and he said, no way, we've missed our Messiah. And he came to faith. He started sharing the gospel on the streets. One day he ran into another gospel-loving Jewish believer, and he said, there's more of us? The two of them got together and started what would become later Chosen People Ministries. In 1842, a German-born Jew named Michael Solomon Alexander had a similar story. He was also a rabbi. He also came to faith through the witness of Gentiles, and he became an Anglican priest and then later an Anglican bishop, and they sent him to Jerusalem to be the first Anglican bishop in Jerusalem. He had no church. He had to build it. He built it from scratch. How did he build it? Through evangelism. He needed people first. And so he started sharing the gospel. And slowly, one family at a time, he led them to the Lord. He showed them the truth, and they, with open hearts, accepted the Lord. And they grew into dozens of families, and they built a church in Jerusalem, in the old city. That church is still there today. And that legacy is still there today. They're still reaching out to this day. They're no longer exactly Anglicans, they're evangelical Anglicans, but they're still there and they're still sharing the gospel. Rabbi Daniel Cion, he also moved to Israel. He was a rabbi in Sofia, Bulgaria around the time of the Nazis. And he politically fought against, and argued for, before the king of Bulgaria, to not have anything to do with the Nazis and to preserve the Jewish community. And they tried really hard, and they succeeded. He was not the chief rabbi initially. He later became the chief rabbi. And while he was doing all of this, he ran into a mystic who was Jewish and then became Christian. And he started showing him how the gospel is in the Old Testament. It's there in the Jewish scriptures. And he came to faith. And when he came to faith, he became chief rabbi of Bulgaria. Crazy. As a chief rabbi. They survived the Nazis, but they didn't survive the Russians. When the Russians came and took over, he decided he was going to go to Israel. He left to Israel with most of the Bulgarian Jewish population from the town of Sofia. They all followed him. They all moved together to Tel Aviv. When I moved to Tel Aviv in 2002, I started attending a Messianic congregation, and the pastor there is the son of Rabbi Sion's Bible study students. He would preach. He actually preached in the great synagogue of Tel Aviv as a Jewish believer, but he didn't preach the New Testament except after services in his house. He had this private Bible study. Eventually, he was stripped of his credentials. He was taken, not just chief rabbi. His credentials were erased. Most places don't even acknowledge that he was ever a chief rabbi. But his credentials were completely erased. His rabbi ordination was ripped from him. But yet, he continued to faithfully preach the gospel. And I attended a congregation of a third generation of people that he led to the Lord. In 1921, Chosen People Ministries decided we needed ministry in Israel. And so we hired Frank Boothby. He was a British missionary who operated a storefront called the Gospel Gate Room. And we started giving him our newsletters, which were in Yiddish, to share the gospel. And he told us at some point that they were the most prized thing that people would come from all over to get our newsletters because they encouraged them. And they're all about messianic prophecy, our newsletters, about what God is doing, how God reveals himself through messianic prophecy. And they were very highly prized. And he continued to do this work as a missionary with Chosen People Ministries. At the time, we were called American Board of Missions to the Jews, but never mind, we changed our name, but we didn't change our mission. Until he died in 1940. And then we hired, well, I guess we can read it. In the final years of the British Mandate were tumultuous times, and in all the land of Israel. Boothby had written in 1930. Oh, I read that already. Never mind. 1962, Chosen People Ministries called Peter Gutkind, a Jewish believer, to oversee his work. And Gutkind served in Haifa and taught Bible classes, distributed care packages, etc. He had a very thriving ministry. Lots of people were coming to the Lord. So much so that hundreds of Orthodox started protesting in front of his house. Eventually, they burned his house down, and he had to run away to Jerusalem. So there's been opposition. And we had other missionaries and work in Israel, but most of it's one here, one there, two here, two there. Ministry in Israel has always been slow, and it's always been hard. It's always faced a lot of opposition. Does that make sense? And you could say there's only been a handful of ministers with limited resources. Boothby and some of these others were complaining, I have all these immigrants, but they need food, and I have no money to give them food, and they need housing, and I have no housing to give them. I'm doing the best I can. There was always this lack, this desire to help, but without the resources to help. And many just faithfully served until they either retired or passed away, until the 1980s. Everything changed in the 1980s. In the 1980s, we had a huge immigration of Russian immigrants from former Soviet Union. And at that point in time, things changed dramatically in the sense that a lot more believers just came. Some of them, most of them came to faith, actually, in the 1980s due to evangelism. Most of these Russian immigrants were searching for something. They came with nothing, and finally believing in God was no longer illegal. And you could do it. And so many came to faith. So we did a survey. Jewish believers in the land, did a survey in 2000. And in that survey, they discovered about 10,000 believers in the land of Israel. I'm guessing you have more than 10,000 believers in Athens. I'm guessing. I don't actually know. But maybe in the county for sure. We had 10,000 believers in the whole country at the time of 6 million. All right? So a very small percentage. And you could say that they were mostly Russian speakers operating Bible studies congregations, and they had publications ministries. Our ministry ran a publication ministry in Russian. We still do it, actually, to this day. And that went on. But as those things started to develop, we developed more and more ministries. More and more congregations started to flourish. Everything just started to grow. Like sometimes you plant a seed and you watch it and it grows very, very slowly. At some point, it just starts to really take off. It took off in the 1980s. In 2020, Israel College of the Bible created a survey, and they discovered 50,000 believers in the land, roughly. That's their conservative estimate. All right, so we're talking about 5 times growth. 500% growth in about 20 years. Okay, that's pretty remarkable. And what we discovered about ministry in Israel is interesting. We had Russian speakers operating Bible studies, congregations, publications, just like we had before. But now we have ministry to secular Israelis, youth ministry, coffee shop outreach, that's what I do, music ministry, ministry to young adults, partnerships with a rehabilitation center, we do that as well. English programs, social media outreach, online testimonies, training programs for leaders. It has grown. It has blossomed. I'll tell you, I'll show you some visuals so that you can kind of see. We have, this is our outreach center in Tel Aviv, and we have coffee shop ministries. We have ministry to kids and young adults, and we do seminars. And you can just go through those pictures. We celebrate, on Friday nights, we have what we call Kabbalat Shabbat, the welcoming in or the reception of the Sabbath. We have that we do with young adults or young families. We've been doing English as a second language that we stopped during COVID for kids and for adults as well. All this is just a taste of what ministry is going on in Israel. And we personally do a lot with social media outreach. I don't know if you guys know that this is a great way to reach the gospel with people, but we do this as well. And we do it with partnerships with other ministries. We like to partner. And we do other kinds of literature outreach, etc. So all that to say that there's a lot of ministry going on. How much has the body of Messiah grown in recent years? Let's look at the numbers. We have over 200 congregations, predominantly that are predominantly Jewish believers. Like if you were to compare that with Messianic congregations in America that are mostly Gentiles with a few Jewish believers, in Israel there's a few Gentiles with mostly Jewish believers. Does that make sense? And it makes statistically, it makes a lot of sense because we're now almost 9 million people in the country. Of that, 8 million are Jewish. So it makes sense. We have strong. We also have a strong group of evangelical Arab believers that we partner with in various aspects of ministry. We have, well, it's not all peachy keen, but we have some that we really do get along with really well because of theological agreements. There's more evangelism recently. And I say that because that's important. Because if you go to your school and you're in 6th grade and you say, I believe in Jesus, there's no problem, right? You can do that. Whereas if you do that in Israel, you could be in big trouble. The teacher will try to talk you out of it. Your classmates will try to talk you out of it. You could be harassed. It's not okay to believe in Jesus in the culture of Israel. And so for a long time, especially when I first moved there in 2002, it was really difficult for kids to let their best friends know that they believe that Jesus is the Messiah. That's the reality. People would go into the army, and they may tell one friend in the army, maybe, when they get to that age. And that's changed. It's changed dramatically. Now we find a lot more believers, which means there's more knowledge of the gospel. There's more knowledge about Jesus. Just be honest. When you asked most Jewish people 20 years ago who Jesus is, well, he was a Gentile anti-Semite who wrote a book on how to persecute Jews called the New Testament. You didn't know that? I've been told it. So things have changed. The truth is getting out there, guys. And that's encouraging. So a lot has changed for the good. Knowledge about Jesus is growing. Incredible unity amongst believers. We have pastors' meetings once a month where almost every pastor in the country gets together and prays for each other. No matter what theological disagreements they may have, they all get together and pray for each other. There's a lot of partnerships between missionaries and between ministries. I would say, generally, our doctrine is healthy. That's pretty special. And there's many second-generation Jewish believers. I would say this: we face opposition, we face persecution, we have a lack of places to meet. That's a huge need. And there's a great need for theological training. But all in all, I see the upward trend of ministry in Israel being very positive, very good, by God's grace. When I say opposition, though, I need to give you a picture. So I'll show you. These are two anti-missionaries standing outside our center with a sign that says, if you want to know the truth, go that way, not that way. And this sign that says, beware, there are missionaries here. Careful, they'll kill your soul. And then here's an article that they posted. This article was posted, 3 weeks ago? In an ultra-Orthodox newspaper. That's a picture of my former neighbor. I don't know if you can see, it's kind of small, but it's a picture of my former neighbor standing outside with his anti-missionary friends. He's the one with the big hat, telling people not to enter and trying to convince people not to go into our activities. And then they wrote this article lying about us, and they called the police on us, and all of that. So we have opposition. These are recent photos. This is 2 weeks ago, an event in our center. Does their opposition standing outside trying to convince people not to let us in or calling the police, does it affect us? Actually, to be honest, it enhances our ministry. Think about that. It enhances our ministry. Why? We had people coming and they said, well, what's all this opposition? Why are they protesting outside? Let me go see what's going on here. Somebody who would otherwise just walk by, they come in and they ask questions. It enhances our ministry. So, annoying. Don't get me wrong. It's annoying, but it's a good kind of annoying. It has good fruit because it helps us grow in our ministry. So, if I were to say today, in summary, although we face a great deal of opposition, the gospel goes forward without flinching. And we view our role as being trumpets. Remember, we talked about this, being trumpets for the Lord, being that call to repentance. And not everyone will heed the call, but we must be faithful to deliver that message. So what makes us healthy? What helps us? We have a powerful ally. We have many powerful allies. Who's our most powerful ally? God himself. We stand on the truth. We stand on that truth that Jesus died. He was raised from the dead, according to the Scriptures, on the third day. That's a powerful truth. We have prayer. Your prayers, in fact, are supporting us. We stand on the Scriptures, on the truth of the Word of God. And we also have the testimony of our changed lives. And here's a point I want to sit on for a minute. When I share the gospel with people, my personal stories about what God has done in my life are usually the most powerful testimony that I can give them. Because I can tell them about Joe that I know, and his life was changed, but he doesn't know Joe. He knows me. Maybe he only knows me for 10 seconds, but he knows me. I'm a real person. And when I can share what God has done in my life, it makes a huge impact. And that is our strategy normally when we're sharing the gospel with people. You could say that it's the one thing they can't really argue about. You could say, well, this passage means such and such. Well, I don't believe in the Bible. You've lost your power. You've lost your source of authority because you don't have the same common ground. But if you say, well, this is what happened to me, and I give all the credit to God, they could say, okay, well, that's your story. They can't argue with your story because it's yours, right? And you could say, would you like God to do something like that in your life? What are your needs? How can I pray for you? Let's pray and see if God will answer your prayers as well. This is strategy, guys. And it's an important strategy. Now, how many of you have told your stories, your God stories, to other people? I'm just curious. All right. So, we talk about, I'm an evangelist, right? So, I'm a missionary. This is how I think. We talk about how do we grow the kingdom? How do we get more people to come to church? How do we share the gospel? The answer is very simple. One person at a time. So who is it in your life that you could share the gospel with soon? That you could share your God stories? And you could share these truths? Because it's like, and I've likened this to before, it's like, let's say I discover a cure for cancer. Maybe there's a medicine, I heard about it. Somewhere in Antarctica, there's a secret lab and they know about it. I don't know, I'm making up stuff. But I know about it, and I know that if you just go to this website, you order it, it's going to cure cancer. Would I keep that information to myself if I met somebody who's got cancer? Not in a million years. Why? Because it's going to save their life. Even if it's somebody I don't know, I'm going to share it with them because it's going to save their life. You guys have the cure for death. You have it. Don't keep it to yourselves. You have the cure for eternal salvation, the cure for overcoming death. Share it. Okay? Share it. Don't keep it to yourselves. Don't worry if you don't have the words. You have a relationship with God, and He'll share it with you. He'll give you the words you need. You don't have to worry about any of that. Just go and make disciples.